Welcome back again to the new learning video. Today, we're diving into a massive overhaul of India's workplace rules. We're talking about a change that promises to totally reshape the relationship between millions of employers and employees all across the country. So, to really get a grip on just how big this change is, you kind of have to look at what we had before. For decades, India's whole labor landscape was this complex web of 29 different central laws. I mean, a lot of them were written for a completely different era of work.
So you can imagine, faced with this tangled mess of rules, the government basically said, okay, it's time for a major simplification. The whole goal was to consolidate everything and streamline them into just 4 big, comprehensive codes. But what does this actually mean, for employees and businesses on the ground? How is it going to affect your salary, your job security, or even your rights if you're a gig worker?
Don't worry, we're going to break it all down. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll look at how your salary is being redefined, check out the new rules on hiring and firing, dive into a new deal for gig workers, cover changes to workplace safety, and then of course the big question, when does this all actually take effect?
All right, first up, let's get right into what's probably one of the most significant changes, one that impacts every single payslip, how your salary is now defined and calculated.
So for the first time ever, these new codes introduce a single, standard definition of wage that applies across all the labor laws. Now this consistency, it is a huge deal. Why? Because it directly affects how things are calculated for your retirement savings, your provident fund, and your end-of-service benefits or gratuity. And that brings us to this new 50% rule. See, in the past, companies could get a little creative and structure your salary with a really low basic component. They did this to keep their Social Security contributions down. Well, this new rule, it changes that completely. It says that your basic salary plus your dearness allowance, that's basically an inflation adjustment, has to be at least half of your total compensation. No more wiggle room.
So yeah, for some people, this change might mean a slightly lower take-home salary each month. But the flip side is, it also means more money is being tucked away for your retirement. Okay, now let's shift gears and look at how these codes impact the rules for businesses themselves, especially when it comes to hiring and, downsizing.
Right, so a really major change here is that larger companies are getting a lot more flexibility. It used to be that any firm with 100 or more workers needed to get government permission before any layoffs or closures. That number? It's been raised significantly.
The new threshold is now 300 employees. Now, as you can imagine, this is a big deal. Business groups argue it's absolutely vital for being agile in today's economy, while unions are worried it could weaken job security. The codes also formally recognize something called fixed-term employment. This basically lets companies hire people on contract, but, and this is key, it makes sure those workers get the same core benefits, like retirement contributions, as permanent staff.
Okay, and what about industrial action? Strikes? Well, the rules for those have also been standardized across all sectors. From now on, any group of workers has to give a 14-day advance notice before they can legally go on strike. The idea, of course, is to create a window for negotiation before things escalate.
And this brings us to a really rapidly growing group of workers, folks who, until now, have been operating in a bit of a gray area, pretty much outside the scope of most labor laws.
I mean, have you ever stopped to wonder about the rights and protections for people working for those app-based services? The drivers, the delivery partners, all the freelancers who really power so much of our modern economy.
Well, for the very first time, the new Social Security Code brings them right into the fold. We're talking gig workers, platform workers, and freelancers. They're now explicitly recognized and will be eligible for Social Security benefits. And let me tell you, this is a landmark move.
This is just a massive step towards providing a real safety net for millions of people in India's unorganized and gig economy. Okay, so now let's shift our focus a bit. Let's go from who is working to where they're working, the workplace itself.
So the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, let's just call it the OSH code for short, it pulls together 13 old laws into just one, and it introduces a bunch of key changes. For example, work hours are standardized. Women are now able to work night shifts, but with the condition that their employer has to ensure their safety. Certain workers are now entitled to free health checkups, and there are even new protections for migrant workers.
Okay, so with all these huge changes passed by Parliament, you're probably asking the most important question of all, right? When does this new reality actually begin?
So,
Are these codes the law of the land right now? Like, can you expect to see all these changes on your very next payslip?
Well, the short answer is not quite. And the reason for the delay really shows you just how complex a nationwide reform like this is. See, even though the central government has passed the codes, the full implementation is still pending. That's because labor is what's called a concurrent subject. All that means is that individual states have to frame their own rules to line up with the central codes. And on top of all that, you can imagine the back-end systems for things like payroll and Social Security. They need a massive coordinated update.
So, long story short, while the framework is pretty much ready to go, the on-the-ground reality hasn't fully changed just yet. But the stated goal is crystal clear: simplify the rules for businesses, boost the rights for workers, and, at the end of the day, attract more investment into the country. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on as this massive transformation unfolds. It's the central question at the very heart of this reform, isn't it? Will these codes truly strike the right balance? Will they create a genuine win-win for both businesses that need flexibility and workers who need security in this new Indian economy? I guess only time will tell.
Thank you so much for watching this explainer. What are your thoughts on these new labor codes? We'd love to hear from you, so let us know down in the comment box below. And hey, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into complex topics just like this one.